Hi folks, so we are going to perform a test on this battery. I'll take you through everything now. Basically, we have put a temperature probe onto the main negative on the cell, the main negative cell. We have a temperature probe on the main positive, actually here it is here, 29.5 on the main positive, and then another probe on the main positive cable inside there. So 3 probes inside the box. We also have the BMS itself. We're bringing these cables out. So this is a temperature controlled booth. We've heated the whole battery up to 30 degrees centigrade. So everything in there is 30 degrees centigrade. And we come out to this shunt here, a smart shunt. This is a Juntec shunt. Come to a 2 kilowatt Guandel inverter, and from here we come to this simple household heater. And the purpose of this test is not to measure the capacity of the batteries, but we want to see how hot this battery gets under load. So we did this some weeks back, and you may have seen that bit of media, but what we've done now is we have heated the whole battery up to 30 degrees centigrade. So it's starting off quite warm. We think a realistic warmth even for some tropical situations. Obviously you can go much higher. If you were in the Kruger Park in South Africa, you'd go to 50 degrees maybe. Hottest we've ever been is 52 degrees in Kruger National Park in South Africa, but we think 30 degrees is quite a warm temperature to start with. Certainly in the whole of Europe, it's pretty much about the hottest that you'd expect your batteries to start with, unless they're in a very hot engine room or something like that. So start at 30 degrees. We're going to hit them with the load for 1 hour of around about 150 amps. It is a 150 amp BMS in there. So we'll be testing the BMS, its ability to withstand the temperature, see what temperature it gets to, and we'll see what temperature everything else gets to, and then see how it goes. So we will kick off the test now. So let's get the inverter on, and there's the inverter on, and the fan comes on, nice and warm. And off we go. While it's doing that, just for interest, these are the cables that come with the inverter, with the Guandel inverter. They really get hot, uncomfortably hot, and they are 2 16 millimeter cables, so making up close on 35 millimeters in total. We made these 35 mil cables up, straight cables, that cope with the heat much better than these do. So let's see how the test progresses, and we will let you know the results when it's all done. Right, so we are ready to start the testing, and we just bumped this up a little bit, so everything is running at just around about 30 degrees centigrade. The box itself is sitting mostly at 35, but the battery itself still is warming up and is about 30 degrees centigrade. So we're going to start the test. We're going to run it at over its capacity, over the capacity of the BMS. And so the BMS is rated at 150 amps. We're going to run it at about 170. And the way we're going to do that is we've got cables coming out from the battery here. So there's our battery with the positive and negative cables coming off. We've got a few temperature probes coming out. We're going to go to this Guandel or Jandel inverter through the shunt to the inverter, and then just using a standard old heater. So let's kick that off and find the on switch. Right, and so that's now drawing 76 amps. And I'm going to bump it up even more, way over the capacity of this BMS. Well, it actually is sitting at 152 at the moment, so that's not too bad. 150, so it's actually on capacity, but as the voltage drops, so that will increase. Currently we're running at 12.7 volts on the shunt. So we're going to monitor the temperature closely. So the first one will be of the positive terminal inside there, then the positive cable, negative terminal, and we'll be checking on the temperature of the BMS itself using the app. So stay tuned. So we've been running this for 10 minutes at the moment. The hottest terminal is the negative terminal. Interestingly, it has come up to 40 degrees, so it has gained 10 degrees or so, 11 degrees almost, followed closely by the main positive, which has gained close on 10 degrees as well. And this is the positive cable, so it's at 33, so it's only gained 3-4 degrees. This is the external, you see on the external negative cable, that's just gained a few degrees as well, very similar to the internal cable. On the BMS app, we're at 35 degrees centigrade on the app itself, so the BMS has not increased that much, so it's quite fine. We're running at about 153.6, so they're quite close. The shunt and the BMS are reporting very similar figures and counting down. Interestingly, the 150 amp daily BMS, when you are drawing, it shows a positive current. When you are charging, it shows a negative current. The other BMSs show it the other way around, which is confusing for some people. But I guess if you just have one kind of BMS and you're used to it, then you're used to it, not a problem. The shunt also shows a positive amount drawn and a negative amount when you charge. So we've been running for an hour at 155 amps now. Started off at about 153, 154, it's moved to 155.3 just due to voltage drops. So we've dropped very, very slightly. As you can see, we're at about 46% state of charge, so used just over half of the battery. So temperature wise, we start at the highest temperature is the negative cell, the main negative terminal, so that's coming off the connection and the cell, so just under 60 degrees, so not too bad. This is the main positive terminal, so 52 degrees centigrade, and this is the main positive cable within the box, just to see how warm it gets, 42. And this is the external main negative, this one here, which has got to 44, 45, as you can see. Used up 155 amp hours so far of a 280 amp hour battery. So yeah, it's going well. We're going to stop the test now because the purpose of this test was to run a very heavy load for an hour to see just how the battery would cope in terms of temperature. So not really much point in continuing. It will continue to rise. We know that running an hour at such a heavy load on this particular battery yields a roughly 30 degrees centigrade increase in temperature, which is quite acceptable because we're still around about 60 degrees centigrade, and we could go quite a bit higher. But yeah, we think that for most uses this battery is quite okay. So that concludes the temperature test. So this wasn't a capacity test, this was a temperature test. We know that the cells are 280 amp hours. We've tested enough of them to know that every single cell so far has passed that test. There have been no cells that have been less than 280 amp hours in this whole batch. So 280 amp hour battery, that is a drop-in replacement size. So this plastic case that they're in is a drop-in size. This is the size of a normal 100 amp hour lead acid leisure battery, if you like. But this is 280 amp hours of lithium iron phosphate, and it is protected and managed by a 150 amp DALI BMS, battery management system, and that has Bluetooth built in. So we've got a Bluetooth dongle here that we can communicate with the BMS. And the question was always, how hot will this get under load? Will it become unusable eventually under load? And how long can we run a really heavy load for? So we ran a load of in excess of 150 amps for just more than 1 hour, and it was absolutely fine. So it got to about 45% state of charge, so used up 55% of its charge. And the hottest terminal was this negative one here, which got to about 60 degrees centigrade, so a 30-degree increase over 1 hour of very heavy load. This one was close behind it, the main positive. The cables were fairly warm, but actually the battery was absolutely fine. The BMS was starting to warm up quite a lot, and not surprising, no surprises there. So everything was getting quite warm, but still could have gone a lot longer. I think we could have come close to, maybe fairly close to discharging the battery. But I think in a real life situation, drawing 155 amps for over an hour was quite realistic. I mean, how often are you going to actually do that? Now, just to speak to this a little bit, why did we choose a 150 amp BMS when the standard drop-in replacement that you buy from here, there and everywhere can possibly be 280 amp hours, but it's not normally 280 amp hours. They're usually a lot less. They're usually around about 150 amp hours, 100 to 150 amp hours. So this is 280 amp hours, and most drop-in replacements they run off a 100 amp BMS. And we decided that 100 amp was simply not enough. If you take into account our little mini oven that we have in our motorhome, that requires 1.2 kilowatts to run. So it'll be roughly 1250, 1300 watts running off here. So a 100 amp BMS would not be enough to run that oven. And if you look at our coffee machine, it uses about 90 amps. So yes, it would 100 amp BMS would manage, but it's pretty much at the limit. So we thought for these drop-in replacements, 100 amps is just not comfortable. It's just not enough. 150 amps is actually the sweet spot. Yes, we'd love to have 200 amps, but practically we don't ever draw more than 150 amps. We never have in our van, probably never will. So 150 amp BMS in a replacement box with 280 amp hour cells is a really, really nice battery. And we've put this through a very rigorous temperature test to see how it'll fare. And in our opinion, it has done really, really well. We think this is an excellent combination of components.